My name is Diana Byrne, and welcome to Writing Effective AI Prompts for Educators. I think I've called it a couple of different things, like how to write an AI prompt for educators, but this is where we're landing. So whether you're watching this live or you're catching the recording later, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad that you're able to watch with us. Um, so I'll jump right in. When we talk about artificial intelligence, it's no longer futuristic. It's in the tools that our students and teachers use every day, often without even realizing it, from spell check to translation tools to lesson planning assistance. AI is embedded in education everywhere. But here's the catch: AI is only as useful as the prompts that we give it. And a vague prompt gives us generic or even sometimes wrong results, while a strong, specific prompt can save us hours and support much deeper learning. So that's why prompt writing is becoming a critical skill for today's educators, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, for today's students as well. Let's talk about quickly what a prompt is. A prompt is the instruction that you give an AI tool. So AI doesn't think the way humans do. It actually doesn't think. It responds to instructions. And a prompt is how we tell the AI what role to take, what task to perform, and how to deliver the response. And without a clear prompt, the AI just kind of guesses based on patterns that it's seen before or patterns that have been input to it. And this can often lead to vague or unhelpful results. So strong prompts give AI the direction and the context it needs to generate useful, accurate, and relevant output for your classroom or for your school. In a weak prompt, for example, it might ask an AI to write about the Civil War, whereas a strong prompt may ask an AI to summarize the causes of the Civil War in 5 sentences for seventh grade using simple language. So, a key takeaway from this whole webinar is going to be that better inputs equal better outputs. The input being the prompt, the output being what AI generates. So, if you see here on your screen, this is called the FAST framework. And the FAST framework is a simple teacher and student and everyone friendly way to write an effective AI prompt. It was developed by practitioners in education who were experimenting with ways to help teachers and students get better results from AI tools without actually needing technical expertise. There are longer and more complex models for writing prompts, but it feels like this is the better way to go because, for schools, for educators, for students, because it fits better into the day. It's better to understand, and it kind of adapts better to things that teachers or students would use use AI for. So FAST stands for, as you can see here on your screen, FAST. The F is to frame the role and the audience. This is where you're going to tell your AI who to act as or who the output is for. So, for example, you might say, act as a fifth grade teacher, or you might say, write for ninth graders who are learning biology. The A stands for aim, and this is where you want to state the task and the outcome clearly. So, for example, you might say, create a 10-question quiz or write a summary that students can understand. The S stands for supply context. Here's where you're going to add things like subject matter or constraints or important details. Like, well, I can kind of have it here with your good versus weak example there. By supplying context, we might say something like that they're writing about photosynthesis with 2 questions on light reactions and 2 questions on dark reactions. So that's how you're adding more information to the prompt. And then you're going to tell it the format. So specifically, how do you want this delivered? Do you want it in bullets? Do you want it in paragraph or quiz? Do you want it in, a multiple choice quiz? Do you want it in a table? So for example, you might have and add at least one higher order question in multiple choice format. So why FAST works is because AI needs clear, structured instructions to give it useful results, or sorry, for it to give useful results. If the prompt is vague, the output is going to be vague. And again, the output here refers to what the AI gives you. FAST actually also gives teachers and students kind of an easy checklist to make sure that their prompts always include the most important details, like the audience, the task, the context, and the format. And it helps prevent generic responses and makes I feel more like a real assistant and not so much like a guessing machine. So if we look here at the examples of good versus weak, which I just kind of alluded to before, you could see that a weak prompt might say, make a worksheet on photosynthesis. If you write something like that, the result is likely going to be too broad or generic and maybe even off level for students. A fast prompt would be, again, to build on what we talked about before, create a 10-question multiple choice quiz on photosynthesis for 9th grade biology with 2 questions on light reactions, 2 on dark reactions, and at least 1 higher order question. The result with something like that, with a prompt like that, is going to be more tailored and specific and directly usable for your class. When you compare the 2 results side by side, it becomes pretty clear that FAST turns a vague request into something precise and practical and aligned to teaching needs. It's not just a framework, it's really more of a habit. So by practicing it, when I say it, I mean the FAST framework, teachers and students, and again, we'll talk a little bit more about the students in a bit, teachers and students learn to be clear, intentional, and critical in how they use AI. So this supports better outputs, it saves time, and it builds AI literacy that transfers far beyond the classroom. So again, practicing gives everybody clear, intentional, and critical thinking in how they use their AI. Now, this is important. When we talk about just writing prompts, you have to remember that AI is still not perfect, not yet. We're not at the level where AI will start correcting itself. Eventually it will do that, but we're not at that level yet. And it doesn't yet see the mistakes that it makes. And because we're at the narrow AI level, where the generative AI that we typically use in education, when I say generative AI, I mean like, Chat or Claude or these things that you're familiar with, that anybody might be familiar with or have heard of. Those are large language models. And we typically use the generative AI and assistive AI in education. So it still contains bias or errors based on the data that it pulls from. Sometimes it hallucinates responses. So therefore, we still have to check the AI's work. So creating a prompt is really a 2-part process. At least that's the way that I look at it and the way that, I talk to teachers and students about it. So writing a prompt is the first part. Then what comes next is that you have to refine what AI gives you. And that's where what you see here on the screen is where the edit framework comes in. Edit is a very friendly routine for taking raw AI output and shaping it into something that's accurate, student ready, and aligned with your voice and standards. So, as you can see here, EDIT stands for Evaluate, Determine, Identify, and Transform. Evaluate means, does the AI response make sense? Determine asks, does it fully answer the task or meet the assignment goals? Identify is asking what errors, biases, or missing pieces of information can you spot? And transform is how can you add your expertise? How can you rewrite it, or how can you adapt it for your students? AI responses are plausible, but they're not always accurate. So without editing, teachers risk passing along misinformation, as do students when they use AI. So the EDIT framework shifts teachers and students into the role of critical consumers of AI as opposed to passive users. It models digital literacy that we want students to build themselves, like fact checking, revision, and voice preservation. And it ensures that when I say it, when you're using the edit framework, it ensures that outputs are tailored to your classroom, your learners, your curriculum, and your teaching style. You're going to write your prompt, submit your prompt to AI. AI is going to produce something. Then when you have that output, that's when you start with your edit framework. So for evaluate, you're going to read your AI output basically like it's a draft from a student. And you're going to ask, does this make logical sense? Is it clear? Is it age appropriate or audience appropriate, depending on who you're writing for? Then for the determine portion, you're going to compare it to your task. So you're comparing the output to the task that you asked it to do. So if you asked for a 7th grade science explanation, does it hit at that right level? Does it meet the length and the format that you asked for? For identify, you're going to note anything that's inaccurate or biased or vague, or if it's missing a key detail. And this, by the way, could include fake citations, which is a part of AI hallucination, or overcomplicated language or lack of context. And then you're going to transform it. And this is the human part of it. And this is your expertise. So you're going to add examples from your curriculum or examples from your school or community or something else that you've been working on. And you'll rephrase it to match your tone or scaffold it for your students' needs. It's important to note here too that right now, unless you've really trained your generative AI, it doesn't have an actual memory. So it won't naturally add examples or anecdotes from something that you previously worked on with the AI. So that's why the transformation portion is significant. It can if you've really, really trained it, but that's for a different day. So I want you to, imagine that you asked AI to create 5 discussion questions about Romeo and Juliet for 9th graders. The AI gives you 5 questions, and at first glance, they look fine. But then you evaluate it and you notice that 2 questions are very surface level, like what happens in Act 1. So then you determine, by looking back at the task you gave it and the output, and the task, you remember, was to spark discussion. So these don't actually push students to think critically, these very surface level questions. So you identify that the output didn't address themes of love or conflict or fate, which are key to your unit. So then you can transform it in one of 2 ways. You can either go back and ask the AI to modify by, for example, writing 2 questions that focus on interpretation, or you can write those questions yourself. So that's how you would transform. So now you've taken an AI draft and you've made it more rigorous, aligned, and relevant. The edit framework reminds us that teachers are the final editors. An AI can draft, but only the teacher or the student, if they're doing the work, can make the materials accurate, equitable, and truly engaging for their students. So we know that students are experimenting with AI tools, but unfortunately, a lot of them use them poorly by typing in vague commands like write my essay. Teaching them to write effective prompts builds critical thinking. It teaches them to clarify their ideas, and it prevents an over-reliance on AI. It actually shifts the focus from shortcuts to learning. So it's vital to teach your students how to use the FAST and EDIT frameworks to write their prompts. And we can adapt the FAST framework to be more student friendly. And you'll see I did it here on the screen. Again, it's the same FAST, frame, aim, supply, tell, but the description is a little bit more student friendly. So for frame, we say, who should the AI act as? And you would give them an example. Act like a debate coach, or act like a 5th grade teacher, act like a reporter, act like a math star. The aim, you just say to them, what's the task? So help me outline my argument. I need to write a 5-paragraph essay. Outline I need to outline a chapter. These are just ideas. For S, for supply, you're just telling them to add details like what grade level they are, who their audience is, what subject they're doing it for, and any constraints, like don't make the language too complex, make it simple, etc. And then for the tell, you want them to just state the format that they want it in. And you give them examples like bullets, outline, summary, essay, multiple choice. So a strong example might be, again, I'm just giving examples that you could give to your students. So you could say that a weak example is write about climate change, and a better example is create a 5-sentence summary about climate change causes for ninth grade science class, and use simple words and include one example. So I have here an example of a classroom routine for if you're teaching this to your students and teaching them how to write prompts and to edit their prompts. It's essentially prompt, edit, reflect. They draft a prompt using the FAST framework. They run it in an AI tool, and then they use the edit steps, evaluate, determine, identify, and transform to improve the AI's response. Then they reflect with quick questions like, what did AI do? What did I change, etc. Why? When they use these framework, when we use these frameworks with our students, we aren't encouraging them to passively use AI. We recognize that they're going to be using it. We accept it. We teach them how to use it. And this is something which maybe has not been done in the past. We're actually teaching them to think critically. And how are we teaching them to think critically? When we use these two frameworks, we're clarifying their purpose. So when students learn to write strong prompts, and this is, I'm talking about with the FAST framework. When they learn to write strong prompts, they have to decide exactly what they want. For example, instead of write about the Civil War, they have to specify the audience, 7th grade, the scope, causes only, the format, 5 sentences. And that process forces them to articulate goals clearly, which is something that's at the heart of critical thinking. We're having them supply context. So when we're asking them to add constraints like grade level, reading level, perspective, and these things all require students to think about the audience and the intent. And they're practicing analysis and synthesis. Who is this for? What matters most here? What details will guide the answer? And then they're essentially anticipating outcomes. By shaping the input, they're predicting the type of output that they'll get. And this is a form of metacognition, which is thinking about, in this case, how information is structured and how different directions affect results. How does the edit framework build critical thinking? For evaluate, students don't just accept the AI's first draft. They're trained to step back and ask, does this even make sense? Which is applying comprehension skills and discernment. For D, determine, they assess whether the output actually answers the task fully, and this develops their ability to align work with rubrics, learning goals, or essential questions, and it's another layer of higher order thinking. When we ask them for the identify portion, they're spotting errors, bias, or missing voices, which requires an analytical reading. For example, they might notice that an AI-generated essay includes only male scientists, or it misrepresents a historical fact. And identifying those gaps sharpens critical literacy. Finally, with transform, students improve the text using their own language, voice, and reasoning. So they're not just correcting, they're revising with purpose. And this demands creativity, synthesis, and ownership of ideas. So together, FAST and EDIT, or the FAST and EDIT frameworks, turn students from passive consumers to active thinkers. And instead of blindly copying AI answers, they learn to ask precise questions, build complex tasks into steps, critically evaluate outputs, recognize bias and errors, and transform information into something that's uniquely theirs. The cycle mirrors what we want in all learning, which is clarify, analyze, critique, create. And AI becomes a tool for thinking. It doesn't replace the thinking. AI can be a real time saver, but its value comes when we combine it with teacher expertise. So let me explain. Here are just some examples of where we can use AI every day, how it kind of plays out in the day. You could use it for lesson planning. It can help with drafts, objectives, activities, or assessments in seconds. You step in to refine the language, align it with your standards, although you can use it to align with standards as well, and tailor it to your students' needs. An example might be that if you ask AI for 3 sixth grade math lesson objectives on fractions, you review them and then adjust them to match your pacing and curriculum. It helps us with differentiation by rewriting text, for example, at different reading levels, or provides simplified explanations. You step in to ensure accuracy, check that the key content isn't oversimplified, and add scaffolds or enrichment. For example, you might paste a science article into AI and ask it for a 5th grade version. Then you compare the side by side with the original to verify the details. It can help with student support by generating practice questions, worked examples, or give quick feedback. You step in by double checking for accuracy, adjusting for difficulty, and connecting to what you've been teaching. So, for example, you can ask AI to create 10 practice problems on ratios with answer keys. You review the set, edit errors, and swap in a few that maybe better reflect your class's progress. You can use it for communication. It helps, for example, with drafting parent updates, newsletters, or progress notes in a clear and professional language. You step in to add your tone, your context, and your relationship knowledge. For example, AI drafts a note like, your child is showing growth in reading comprehension. You revise it to include specifics like the student's last project and a suggestion for home support. AI is your assistant, not your replacement. It lightens the load by giving you draft ideas and starting points, but you bring the judgment, creativity, and human connection that make learning real for students. So prompt writing is not just a technical skill, it's a thinking skill. For teachers, learning how to write precise prompts unlocks AI's potential to save time, spark creativity, and personalize instruction. It ensures that AI serves as a supportive partner, but not as a shortcut. When we teach students how to write and refine prompts, we're doing more than helping them use technology. We're strengthening critical thinking, clarity of expression, and ownership of learning. Students learn to ask better questions, evaluate responses, and bring their own voice and reasoning to the table. In other words, effective prompt writing equips both teachers and students with the tools to guide AI rather than being guided by it. So it's turning technology into a catalyst for deeper learning, equity, and future readiness. And that's it. So thank you for being here today or for taking the time to watch the recording. I hope it was helpful for you. And if you would like to learn more about AI in education, I've created a professional development course that covers everything you need to know. And that's available through our Engaging Learners Academy, which you can find on the Engaging Learners page, or you can email us and we'll send you the link for that. Or if you would like professional development live, I'm available for that as well. And that's all done through the Engaging Learners website. So are there any questions? Any questions or comments?
No, I thought that was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope so.
Okay. All right. No questions. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and stop recording.
Okay.